Here's a creepy tale from my youth, which I'll tell you before enjoying my pasta primavera. I was 12 years old. On the old desk were two giant jars. One was filled with Kennedy half dollars, the other with human teeth. Let me set the table here. It's the late 1970s in a blue collar Massachusetts town, a place of faded cars, graffiti covered trains, and red brick factories. Back then, the smokestack still spewed black into the sky. My sister was a year younger. We also have a brother that's 6 years younger than me. He'll enter the story later. Mom knew a lady who owned a little gift shop. I grabbed some video for you, but a lot has changed since then. My mom would sometimes give us $1 or $2 to go buy something there to get us out of her hair and help her friend out a little. One time, the shop owner told us an old man who lived upstairs on the 3rd floor needed someone to go to the store for him. Apparently, he hadn't left the apartment in many years. The building was what we call around here a 3-decker. Shop on the 1st floor, apartments on the 2nd and 3rd. The stairs led up from the street beside the shop entrance. So up we went, eager to earn a bit of money. We got more and more nervous as we went up. Just a creepy feeling. The stairwell was almost totally dark in places. The 3rd floor landing was lit by a dim bulb so old it must have come straight from Edison's lab. Before the door, we hesitated. It was dead of winter, and wind battered the rickety building, making the stairwell creak. Finally, I knocked so lightly we ourselves could barely hear it, but a voice told us to come in. Sure enough, the door was open when we pushed. We stood just outside the doorway, not entering the apartment. Inside, a shriveled old man sat at a desk with his back to us. He didn't turn around. On the desk were the 2 gigantic jars, one with the half dollars, the other with the teeth. He was scribbling into a ledger and didn't stop writing or seem to even notice that we were there. We looked around the musty room. Sparse, dusty furniture from another time. Dark, cold. Looking through the grimy window, we could see freight trains crawling in the distance. Man, it was freezing in that apartment. The man wore a fedora. Little wisps of white hair sprouted along his neck like weeds. A couple of blocks away, the church bell started ringing, and though we were used to it, here it startled us. My sister, getting a bad vibe, started tugging at my elbow to leave. Girls have more sense than boys. I was about to give in when the old man slapped a couple of half dollars onto the desk. "Milk," he said. Hesitating only a moment, I finally broke away from my sister and approached the desk. The idea of reaching for that money made me nervous. The man never stopped scribbling, and though he was tiny and frail, I was irrationally terrified he'd snatch my hand. But the chance to make some money was strong enough to overcome my fear, so I took the coins. The shadow from the fedora and the dim light prevented me from getting much of a look at the man's face. We ran to Robert's supermarket a few blocks away, then returned with the milk and change. My sister waited nervously just outside the open door. The old man didn't look up or slow his scribbling. Dust motes floated in the air, lit by the pale sunlight penetrating the dingy windows and stiff curtains. The freight train across South Broadway was close enough to almost make out the graffiti on the boxcars. The old man, breaths visible in the cold, said nothing as I approached the desk with the milk. He never looked up when I placed it there with the leftover change. His scribbling hand never slowed while he slapped 2 1964 Kennedy half dollars down onto that change, our pay. I took the money and we left. As the days and weeks went by and winter grew deeper, darker, and colder, I found myself thinking of that weird old man and his giant jars of teeth and half dollars. As kids say nowadays, WTF. Christmas came hard that year as my grandfather had a stroke and was in the hospital dying. We were in the car late one night coming home from visiting him when we drove by the gift shop. Glancing up, I noticed the light was on in that 3rd floor apartment. and I imagined the old man sitting there scribbling away, his cold breath fogging the room. I shuddered. Weeks later, maybe around February, Mom got a call from the gift shop. The old man needed someone to run an errand. This time, my sister had no interest in going. So I stopped by that third floor place in the morning on the way to school. Again, he sat there scribbling away and not looking up. Again, he simply said, "Milk." And again, he clunked 1964 Kennedy half dollars down onto the desk. I took them and promised to return after school. Well, at recess, we played our usual touch football. We were always divided into the same two teams, and the team I was on had a perfect record, 0 wins. The games were sometimes close, but the other guys had just enough more talent that the end was never in doubt. They were bigger and stronger. However, something unprecedented happened that day as I quarterbacked the always losing team, half dollars jiggling in my pocket. There was a tie. Beyond all tradition and in the face of destiny itself, the wheels of the universe had ground to a halt and produced a tie. Now, any boy will tell you, at least from generations which grew up before scoreless soccer, that a tie is unnatural and unacceptable. During the summer, curfew was always when the streetlights came on, but they used to flicker for a couple of minutes warming up, so at least there was a kind of 2-minute warning. In a tie situation, we always hurried to end any game. It was a matter of grave urgency, for a tie simply could not stand. A tie left the world imbalanced. You felt a sickening uneasiness until it was settled. Here's how the tie that day at school came about. There were a handful of boys who didn't play sports, mostly kids that were not very athletic. I feel bad saying it now, but they usually just sat on the stairs and watched. Well, that day at lunch, I was sitting with one of them, a kid we for some reason called Cheese. Cheese was kind of a wuss. To be fair, I was also kind of a wuss, at least when it came to fights. In fact, I had a perfect record in that arena too. But I was okay at sports. Anyway, I knew a secret about Cheese. He was fast as lightning. I'm sure you can guess where this is going, but the relevant detail is how I convinced him to join us. I had tried talking him into playing for us before, but I never got anywhere. However, this time I pulled out one of the Kennedy half dollars. His eyes lit up. "I'll toss it," I said. "Heads you play for us, tails you don't." But he said nothing, his eyes on the silver coin as it spun high up over the cafeteria table and all the way till it landed in my hand. "Heads." But he just shook his head. No dice. However, during the football game, he watched me intently from the stairs, something on his mind. It was as the recess clock ran down with our team trailing by 1 touchdown that he waved for my attention. He showed me 2 quarters. I nodded. The deal was struck. He sheepishly entered our huddle. I exchanged a Kennedy half dollar for those 2 quarters, then called the play. With a look of resigned terror, he understood what I wanted. After the snap, I broke left. All the receivers ran left too, as I had told them to. Cheese, however, lingered by the line of scrimmage on the right side, as planned, completely ignored by the defense. That's when I tossed him the ball. Sure as hell, he shot toward the other goal line like he'd been fired out of a cannon. Then the recess bell rang. Oh no, tie game. We celebrated the comeback, of course, but it also left that knot in our stomachs, the result of the world now being out of balance. Well, one unprecedented event deserved another, so we decided to do something unheard of. We'd meet after school, hide till there was no sign of any teachers, then finish the game on the recess lot. That unease that had settled into us now turned into excitement. Every minute, I'd look up at the clock on the wall and find that 5 minutes had miraculously gone by. At the final bell, we slipped outside feeling like we were in possession of a momentous secret. We were going to conduct our own recess after school, unsupervised. Snowflakes drifted in the air. We were enjoying the taste of forbidden fruit. Each team found a nearby yard to hide in while we watched the kids and then the teachers clear out. We argued furiously amongst ourselves over what plays we'd run in the game. Unfortunately, Cheese had decided to retire on top of his brief football career. When the coast was clear, we re-entered the schoolyard. Each team would get 5 possessions. It would be epic. I felt the half dollar like a lucky charm in my pocket. As the game went on, the other team kept scoring. But on this day of miracles, we kept tying it up, so we had a good chance to win. One interception might do it. But then one of the nuns spotted us. She stormed over in her boots and chased us off the field of battle. So once again, things ended at a tie. Most of us lived in the same area of town, so we started for home talking about the day's events. There was a sense of excitement about it all, and we recounted the big plays of the day. But there was also an uneasy feeling. A tie was unnatural, like an eclipse of the sun, or like the scent in the air just before a massive storm hits. And with all those distractions, I completely forgot to get the old man his milk. By the time I remembered the milk, it was almost supper, and the sun had long set. I felt panic. Would the old man think I stole his money? Did he need that milk for some medical reason? What would happen when he told my mom's friend who owned the gift shop? I considered telling my dad and asking him to drive me to the store, but a favor like that would come with a stern lecture about responsibility. A large part of a boy's youth is spent scheming for ways to get out of trouble, so I came up with a plan. I would bring the milk to the old man first thing before school. Ready for bed, I jiggled the $50, which weighed heavy in my hand. They had a different sound to them than regular coins. Many years later, I would understand that this was due to their being made with silver, 1964 being the last year such coins were minted. But to my boy's mind, they seemed to have a unique power to them. No wonder Cheese had wanted one badly enough to join the game. But maybe I wouldn't be in this mess in the first place if he hadn't. My kid brother, 6 years younger, shared the same bedroom with me. When he asked about the $50, I thought about the 2 jars on the old man's desk. For a lot of reasons, I decided to tell him nothing. That night I barely slept, tossing and turning while wondering where those teeth in the jar had come from. Were they donated? Were they taken? Why did he want them? And what was he writing in that ledger book? So troubled was I that I did something even more radical than us playing football on school grounds after hours. I got up way before sunrise, in the middle of the night in fact, quietly dressed, and snuck out of the house in the dark. There was a 24-hour store that I could reach in less than an hour. Large flakes of snow drifted and stuck to the ice on windshields. Snow was just starting to build on the sidewalks. The silence was eerie, no wind. I walked through a frozen world where I was the only thing moving. By the time I reached Union Street, a couple of inches had accumulated, and an occasional car ground tracks into the powder. The clerk in the store 24 was the first person I saw. I felt afraid he'd call the cops on me, a kid out too early, but he just rang up the sale of milk. Half-hour later, I made it to the gift shop. Everything quiet. No traffic on the street that would soon be busy. The freight trains swarmed nearby, one of them crawling along. I could feel the rumble in my feet. Looking up through the wet snowflakes, I could see the light on inside the third-floor apartment. The door from the street was unlocked. Somehow I knew it would be. Up I went, my footsteps loud. The stairwell felt impossibly colder than outside. I knocked. Yes, yes, came the reply. Entering, I found the old man scribbling as always, not turning until I spoke. I got your milk. He whipped around. His face looked like a dried, shriveled apple, a slit for a mouth surrounded by folds of skin. Where his eyebrows should be, shrubs of white hair grew like white candle flames. Below those little bushes, his eyes were wide with panic. Just then, we heard the door from the street open again, felt the air whoosh from the room. Grunts sounded from below, then heavy footsteps on the stairs. The old man, surprisingly quick for his age, jumped to his feet and yanked me further inside the apartment, shutting the door. Hand on his forehead, he searched frantically for an idea what to do. Meanwhile, the footsteps, maybe 2 pair, plodded on the stairs. Deciding a course of action, the old man dragged me across the room to a closet, whipped it open, and shoved me inside. Quiet, he whispered, and closed the door. Terror crippled me. Was I locked in? Who or what was coming up the stairs? I wanted to test the doorknob, but stayed as stiff as a dead rat. The smell of musty old clothes and crumbling leather made my eyes water. I heard the chair legs scrape the floor beneath the desk and the sound of scribbling. The old man was scribbling again. I waited. The heavy footsteps on the stairwell slowly came. Another whoosh when the door opened. Now those heavy footsteps dragged themselves across the floor. The sound of sniffing reached me, like an animal catching a scent. The scribbling never ceased. I held my breath. Then I heard a hand in the jar of $50. The sound of items dropped on the table. A couple of grunts. then more strange animal sniffing. Finally, the footsteps retreated and the apartment door closed. I waited a couple of deep breaths, then escaped the closet. The old man held a finger to shriveled lips. Shh. On the desk, 2 human teeth. One of them had a bit of blood on it. Both looked quite fresh, and the jar of $50 was open. We listened to the heavy footsteps descending the stairs. It seemed to take forever. I thought I heard more sniffing in the air when they reached the bottom. Finally, we heard the door to the street open, and then shortly after that, slam shut. The old man gestured for me to hold still. I glanced out the window in a trance. Go, he finally said at last. I tried to make my steps as quiet as possible when I went down the stairs, and I had to be careful because little puddles from melted snow made every step slippery. When I reached the bottom, I was afraid to open the door onto the sidewalk. What if they, whatever they were, was still out there? But I couldn't wait here either. I felt desperate to get out of this place once and for all, so I pushed open the door and poked my head out. Nothing. I stepped onto the sidewalk. The street was quiet. The freight trains purred. The snow had stopped and the gray sky had grown lighter as dawn approached. I started to hurry off when I looked down. The only footprints in the snow were mine from earlier. I spun around looking at the ground, but the snow cover remained pristine. Well, I made it home, explained my errand to my parents. They went on to school. I told no one details of what had happened. My sleep became very uneasy. Then, to my horror, a few weeks later, my brother had a tooth fall out. As I mentioned, my little bro was 6 years younger than me, and we shared the same bedroom. At his age, he considered it just a part of life that if you put a tooth under your pillow, you wake up the next day with it replaced by money. It's a strange belief when you think about it, and I'm not sure why it didn't trouble us kids. This wasn't Ireland. We didn't believe in fairies, and fairies weren't a part of any other legends we were raised with or any holiday traditions. Think about it. You're a kid, and you're told that some kind of creature is going to enter your room while you're asleep and defenseless. Lift your head and reach under your pillow. Why? Because if for some reason wants your dead tooth. Lying there in bed with the lights out and my brother's tooth under his pillow. For the first time in my life, I thought about this very strange transaction. By that age, I certainly didn't believe in such a thing. I understood that my parents were Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy, but now the whole thing seemed sinister. If such a tooth-desiring creature existed, how would it know where and when to find a tooth? I bolted out of bed. With a flashlight, I grabbed a dollar bill from my sock drawer, then made my way to my brother's bed, reached under the pillow, and found the little prize. In its place, I left the dollar. Of course, I understood my parents would come in later. God, I hoped it was them. They would see the dollar, figure out what I'd done, and add a buck to it. But I took my brother's tooth, opened the window, and tossed it out into the night. A sense of relief accompanied me to bed. As the weeks and months went by, all of this dissolved from my mind. No doubt if my brother lost another baby tooth, I would have done the same thing with it. But as it happened, he didn't, so the whole thing dissipated from my mind. After a while, I didn't even think about the old man scribbling in his cold third-floor apartment. We went on losing games at recess, and football morphed into kickball, and as summer recess loomed, baseball. In the schoolyard, we played a version of baseball that used a big rubber ball and our little fists. Spring stretched at last into summer, and we started playing wiffle ball in our yards at home. On a gorgeous June day, I was in the outfield when someone smashed a shot that reached all the way to the bushes at the base of the house. With the runners running the bases, I dived in, trying to recover the ball as fast as I could. I spotted it quickly, was reaching for it, when I froze. The bedroom window of the room I shared with my brother was right above this spot on the second floor. And right there, on the ground, partially buried in the leaves, was a coin. Forgetting the wiffle ball game, I pulled it out. A Kennedy $50. 1964.